When you really break it down, the thought of someone delivering you food is objectively an unnerving thing. Now think about it for 1 second. A complete stranger is preparing your food, another complete stranger is driving to your location, and then you have an interaction with this stranger who is standing 1 foot away from you. What's even more unnerving is when this happens and you didn't even order food. About 5 years ago, I was dog sitting for my old roommate. I didn't mind at all since I figured I would just stay at his house. I lived there for 2 years, so I didn't feel strange or anything like that, and he had the dog when I used to live there, so I already had a great relationship with the pup. In my mind, this was going to be an easy endeavor. His dog was basically the easiest dog in the world to take care of. I swear that she was part cat or something. You could fill up her food bowl once and she would eat it throughout the day. Most dogs I've seen just go nuts when their bowl gets filled, but not this pup. She never barked and she went out twice a day and did her business. At that point in my life, I was also just really looking for some space and time alone since I was nearing the end of a long-term relationship. I figured the space is just what I needed for a few days to clear my head. His house was beautiful. He had a finished basement with a cartoonishly large fireplace next to a massive TV. I figured I would post up down there for the few days that I was watching the house. My job was boring at the time and it could be done from my computer at home. So I set up my laptop, grabbed some snacks, and basically lived in the basement for a few days with the pup. On Friday night, I was feeling a little lonely since I had been there since Wednesday and I hadn't left the house yet or really seen anybody. I called a couple of buddies over to watch some college basketball and just hang out for the night. We ordered pizza and wings at around 7:30 p.m. and it was delicious. However, this is not where my unfortunate story takes place. My friends left at around midnight and I cleaned up a bit and then decided to get ready for bed. Once I lay on the couch, I ended up pulling up my laptop and starting some work just because I wasn't really tired yet. A little after 1 a.m., I thought I heard the doorbell through my headphones. I put my headphones down and sat still for a moment with my heart beginning to race. When nearly a minute went by and I heard nothing, I felt much better. I figured that it must have been a noise or something in the music that I was listening to that sounded like a doorbell. But then, I heard it again, clear as day, a doorbell. Now being in the basement, I had the slight advantage of seeing the driveway. The window sat just above my head, but if I stood on the tip of my toes, I could see the driveway. So to my surprise, more than my horror, there was a car running in the driveway with the headlights beaming. I couldn't tell what type of car it was from where I was standing because of the bright headlights. My first thought was one of my friends that were there earlier had come back. I thought that maybe they forgot their phone or something and that's why they showed up. I went upstairs and approached the door cautiously. I had all the lights off upstairs and only had the outdoor light above the front door on. As I got closer to the door, I couldn't make out the details of the person on the doorstep. They seemed to have a hood on, and then another brown jacket over the hood. When I got to the door, I cracked it open. Thankfully, there was another screen door in front of that door that was also locked. "Can I help you with something?" I said with some reluctance in my voice. The person grabbed the handle on the screen door and noticed it was locked and took a slight step back. At that moment, I didn't even look at that as alarming. It just happened so quickly that I figured it was an instinct to open the door on his part. He made a small grunting noise, I guess, and then said in an almost shy voice, "Hey, I got your small pizza and wings." He then held up a brown paper bag that was rolled up at the top. I was still trying to make out the details of his face, but he kept his head down at a downward angle. In a very annoyed voice, I said, "It's 1 o'clock in the morning. I didn't order a pizza." The guy looked around nervously and then back at me and said, Yeah, you did. This is the address I have the order for." Then he continued to repeat the address back to me, which was in fact the address of the house that I was staying at. But I slammed the door in the guy's face and shouted, "Well, you guys got the wrong address. Good night." I made my way back to the basement, and I was incredibly annoyed at this point. Just as I sat down on the couch, the doorbell rang again. I went back to the window and saw that the guy's car was still there. Thankfully, the dog slept through all this doorbell nonsense, so I didn't have to deal with a barking dog in addition to everything else going on. I called my friends and asked if they had played some joke on me since I was going to be home alone in the house. And all my friends that were over were already home and in bed. It's also worth noting my friends are not the type of people to really pull jokes like that, especially one as elaborate as this. Then I tried calling the pizza shop that we ordered from earlier. Maybe something weird happened in the system and they accidentally put down my address for another order, but when I looked up the number online, they had closed at 10 p.m., so it wasn't that pizza shop. It had only been around 2 minutes since I looked out the window, but the car was still there, and then the doorbell rang one last time. I contemplated going upstairs again, but I noticed the delivery guy was finally walking back to his car. The relief didn't last long, though. He got into the car, turned it off, and then just sat in it. He didn't leave, and he appeared to be on the phone. I was hoping that maybe he really was a pizza guy and they just had the wrong address and he was talking to his boss or something. Now call me crazy, but I don't think I ever met a delivery guy that was this persistent. I tried to make out the license plate number, but the number was faded out a bit. I know it just started with JC, but that's all I could see. Finally, he backed out of the driveway and drove off. I was slightly concerned, though, because he drove off very slowly and didn't turn on his lights. He just sort of rolled away in the car. I figured this uncomfortable ordeal was finally over and I was not in the mindset to work anymore, so I figured that I would finally try and just sleep. I turned off the TV and sat listening to some music in front of a low-lit fire. In between songs, I thought I heard a car engine. I got off the couch and looked out the window, and there was the same car again. This time parked in front of the house with no headlights. I snuck upstairs to the owner's bedroom to see if I could get a better look. I'm not sure if he noticed me, but then he drove off again. I hid behind the curtain and looked out the window for the next half hour, and the car kept driving by every few minutes. I was scared at this point because I knew something just wasn't right. I grabbed the dog and my laptop and locked the bedroom door upstairs. I was paranoid, but I felt safer doing this. Shortly after 2:30 a.m., the doorbell rang again. I looked out the window and saw no car this time. Then I heard a bunch of knocks at the door, and then that same voice from earlier loudly said, "Your pizza! I have your delivery, sir. Your food's getting cold." I sat quietly and didn't do or say anything. I should have called the police right there and then, or at least told the guy that I was calling the cops. But it wasn't my house and I had never called the police before, so I was just not thinking straight. Then the knock stopped. I didn't hear the voice anymore and I didn't see the car. It was as quiet as could be, and I sat and stared at the ceiling all night until the sun came up. I fed the dog and let her out in the backyard quickly. I looked around for a few minutes that we were outside and then ran back into the house. I made sure she was okay and then I decided I was going to leave. He was going to be back later that night from his trip and I didn't want to stay in that house for another minute. When I left, I nearly tripped walking out the front door. A rolled-up paper bag was on the front steps. I opened it and it just had an empty container that you put wings in sitting at the bottom of the bag. I felt sick as the thoughts flooded into my head, thinking about everything that could have happened. I drove away, and as I got to the end of the street, I saw what I thought may have been the car from the previous night. It was a dark sedan with a license plate that started with JC. I called the owner of the house right away, and he didn't seem too concerned at all, so we just kind of discussed it for a little while, and I left it at that. Nothing ever happened again regarding that incident. I asked my friend countless times if anyone had ever showed up to his house since that night, and he said never once has he ever experienced anything like that. I have no idea what happened, or what kind of danger I was truly in. It was the most uncomfortable and frightening night of my life. I know it may be irrational, but I have yet to order pizza or any other kind of food since. If you enjoyed this scary story, listen to thousands more, either over on the Let's Read YouTube channel or podcast.